Yeah.
How do you work on language? Do you work on with a pretty good first draft, or do you kind of prime the canvas and build from there?
Depends on who you ask. If you ask my editor. For me, for the way I work, I need to have a good sounding sentence. I need a sentence that works. And from there I can build off into other sentences. And that's not necessarily how everyone works, but that's kind of how I start out.
I have another process question. How do you, I guess, prepare yourself mentally, or do you, to write from such radically different perspectives? Is there some sort of method or way into there?
This is my first book. This is my debut book. I don't know. Have you written a book? There's a difference between. Okay, let me start over. I approach every story I write, every book I start, not as something that will exist outside of my own computer. It will not exist outside of my own mind, sort of just the small, intimate circle of people I trust to read it. I don't imagine it out in the world and ready to receive or become the target of praise or criticism. And so that lends a certain confidence to you as the writer. If it fails on your own terms. And so you can pretty much write whatever you're interested in. You should only write what you're interested in, what you are obsessed with, what you value that other people don't really value.
I was actually asking not about sort of the courage to write from your perspective, but actually the how of.
Like, do I run
Is there some way of like arriving in the narrative voice that's so different from your own? It's not at all about the sort of decision, but once you've decided, you get it.
Sure. Well, the answer is no. There really isn't, because here's the thing. This isn't a different voice from mine because I wrote this voice. It's we each of us, writers and non-writers alike, house a multitude of voices because we are capable of imagining what things are like. Right? It's an odd evolutionary development in our species that we know how to imagine. Maybe dogs know how to imagine it, I don't know. But we have this ability, and if we are capable of, at least for a moment in time, suspending this made-up experience, voices can come out of that. It's just a matter of believing it yourself. Yeah.
So I'm curious, did you read about the South? Did you go to the South? Develop any external sense in the area as culture?
Well, the answer is I am willing to bet that you have read more Southern literature than I have. I'm willing to bet that most of you have had a more extensive Southern experience than I have. I've just come back from book tour in Mississippi and Oxford, Jackson, Nashville, and that was my first time down in that part of that country. So no, I don't have this extensive background. You do work, when you work on a novel, you engage in a certain amount of research, you engage in a certain amount of, and there are definitely books that I've consulted for the work. But I don't know, I feel like the research is there, but it's not really there. The research works to help me make the world. It doesn't build the world for you. If that makes any sense.
Oh, complete sense.
Sir?
On your book tour, were you somewhat intimidated about the Southern people's reaction to it? Were you a bit concerned as to whether they would approve because they might be insular, protected their literary establishment?
Sure. I was intimidated by my own perception of how I thought they would react. When I was actually down there, I if everyone was, very genial and warm and very accepting of what I was trying to do. Not everyone, but mostly everyone. So that's a huge lesson for me personally. Gene?
So, I'm sorry for coughing. But, so like, if the advantage of knowing you when you started writing
Yes.
this book, right?
Yes, you
You're
do.
starting it from,
Can I just say that this group right here, I sort of workshopped the book piecemeal for how long would you say? Maybe several years?
yeah, at least 2 years.
Okay.
Well, I'm just-
Fun fact, please continue.
yeah, we're all in the back. I was gonna ask, because you started the book sort of from, you have this really, really abiding interest in blues, right? And I know that when you were starting the book, you were talking about it as being sort of about the blues in a way, like trying to get at some of blues tropes, blues imageries, or particular moods that the blues put you in mind of. There was a sort of vision of the book that was founded on that. I'm wondering, plainly the book evolved substantially away from that. I was wondering if you could talk about sort of when you realized that that was happening, or how that was happening, or just what you feel like the book became beyond that initial vision.
I don't know if it has evolved beyond that. If I were feeling artsy, I would say that my sense of the blues has evolved from the book, but that's just some crazy writer wordplay that's not real. I still think that this book was my way of conveying what the blues does for me, specifically. And I imagine everyone has a different kind of experience with music. But the book is also about other things in some ways. I have either the advantage or disadvantage of sort of coming up, sort of entering adulthood at a time when, the structures of this country are sort of more fragile than recent memory. And part of me was writing towards that, part of trying to understand what it's like to feel like the structures of our world are so fragile. And that's sort of that's the other thing I was sort of looking at when I was writing this book. You're all stunned.
So Bill, what was the impetus? You answered sort of like about the how and of this book, but why? Like, why did you feel the need to write Southern Gospel?
You're sitting next to Phil Clyde, who went with me to Hunter College. And as I mentioned, we had the privilege of studying with Colin McCann. And we entered class the first day. I had written short stories for the last 8 years of my life. I've written nothing but short stories. It was sort of my bread and butter, except no one's paying me for it. And he announced to the class, the next time we meet, I want you to give me your story idea and like a brief outline. Everyone sort of looked around stunned. I thought, well, fuck it, I'll do it. I mean, for me, the process of writing this particular novel comes from trying to answer certain challenges that are set against you. What is sort of the hardest, most difficult thing that you, as a writer where you are right now, for you to do? I guess one of it was figuring out how to write a fucking novel. A short story, well, I won't say a short story is easy, but a short story has a more discrete form, every part of it has a certain understandable functionality. Short story, a novel is it's a mess. It's your computer cables all bundled up, and you're trying to work it out. And it does things that surprises you more often. It leads you in different directions at the same time. But I did it because Colin told me to write a novel. I decided to write a novel on something that was very important to me, which is going back to just trying to convey my feelings about blues music.
But I'm sorry, would you repeat that? Your feelings about?
I said blues music, and then I had this another word, and I thought blues music and I don't know what. Blues music and that time in my life. Blues music and feeling vulnerable. Blues music and sort of wondering if, you know, my life at the age of 14 is going to come back, that sort of thing.
Did you have any experience that made you feel particularly vulnerable?
No, I was a teenager, I was moody, I was overly sensitive. No particular experience, I was just kind of, you know, pain in the ass kid, and pain in the ass kids sort of feel very intensely and think that their problems are the biggest problems in the world. And so I wrote a book. Yeah. Oh, Jen, hey.
I kind of want to ask you if you worked on your personal work on the job, but I won't ask you that. You said something before about going in different directions. I wanted to know if, when you were writing the book, any of your characters went off in directions that didn't work for you, or that you had to sort of reevaluate, or if you had like sort of character issues when you were working on it.
Almost all the time. Almost all the time. I mean, you know, I came from a kind of background's not the right word, but a lot of practice writing short stories. And not necessarily true, but short story characters are more willing to listen to what you tell them. Because they only get to live for so many pages. With a novel, it's hard to sort of imagine that entire mechanism over the span of 200, 300, 400 pages. And so you kind of write in a way, at some point, you know, writing stops and you're just taking dictation, right? At some point, you are no longer in charge of the narrative is in charge of you, and you're just doing some conveyance in which the text appears on the page. And you have to trust that more than your sort of own deliberate machinations in trying to get your characters to, you know, be here at this time and be happy about it. Like they're not going to do it because I don't know why they don't do it. It would be easier, I suppose, but books would be written in a quarter of the time. But that's not how it works. So if anyone's got any clue into that, I'd be willing to hear.
Was there a particular reason why your novel took place in the South? Could it have taken place some other place?
Sure.
Which you alluded to.
Sure. Mississippi is where the blues began. The book starts with the Great Flood of 1927, and that's a huge event in the lives of people in that area, also in the music. If I were to set this novel in 2010, about a plucky Asian American writer in New York City, it would be a different book. It would also, in some ways, be an easier book. It would be there's no risk there. There's a kind of, insincerity is not the right word, but let's say insincerity. If you go and say to yourself, I'm going to write a book about the blues. I want people to read this book and feel what I feel when I listen to Robert Johnson, when I listen to Son House, listen to John Hurt. The only way for me to do that was to go, well, I didn't physically go anywhere, to go in subject matter and go in imagination to the place where this comes from. I hope that's an answer.
Yes, it is.
I think we have time for one more.
All right, better make it a good one.
I'm curious, I don't know if you're thinking about a next book, but if you still feel fascinated with this time period and this location, or if you feel like the need to inhabit something entirely different.
Second one.
Okay.
You may or may not like this book. I kind of like it. And what I like about it is that it sort of exercised me. You know, I still listen to blues, not exclusively anymore, but a lot of the time. It still means a lot to me, but I feel like it doesn't mean anything new to me. So that may change a year down the road, 2 years down the road. It may never change. But for right now, you know, it would be easy enough to sort of write Southern Cross the Dog 2 and have it take place in Chicago. And you know, there are a bunch of characters I could use and they can have their own thing. And I could do it, but it wouldn't, there wouldn't be anything vital in it for me. And I feel like, you know, as a writer living in the world, you only live for so long and you only have so many books, so every book should have something vital in it for you.
Thanks so much, Ben.